Hi, Steve. Hi, John. Nice to meet you here. And John, we didn't talk a lot about assessment, so it's very nice to have you here on Zoom, and maybe next year live. I hope so.
Yes, please. That would be nice. Nice to see you too.
Yeah,
And it's good to see you too, Thomas and Stina.
yeah. So, Stine, you asked why music is relevant as an element in assessment,
Yes.
and yeah, for me, it's very relevant. I I work in Berlin in a specialized department for mental health and developmental disabilities. It's a specialized center for adults with intellectual disability and mental health problems. And I think it's about one third of my clients are on the autism spectrum. I think it's the same with you, John. You are also very into autism spectrum conditions. And I developed the MUSAT. It's a music-based assessment to diagnose autism in this group. And there is no diagnostic standard in adults with intellectual disability. And so it's very important to go new ways. And I feel that music is an age independent form of play. And so you can get into contact, you can drum with a 5-year-old boy or a 50-year-old man. It doesn't make a big difference. And so there's the aiders for children and youth. It's a play and interview based assessment or diagnostic instrument. And so I use music and I feel it's age appropriate, and that makes it very useful. So that's one point. Maybe, John, you get another point, and maybe I got a third point.
Yeah, John, microphone. Oh, that.
Sorry. Yeah, I'd love to piggyback onto that. So I come from a music centered background, so I think my epistemology as a music therapist is grounded in looking or trying to understand music as health. And so, what does that mean? For me, coming from being a musician and then a music therapist, um, I think that just the aesthetic components of being able to experience music, or whether it's playing or listening actively, is a human experience. It's something that reminds us, in my opinion, of humanity. And the clients that I work with, like you, Thomas, primarily I work with individuals, autistic individuals, um, and they have their ways of musicking, and so I feel that it's another way of being for them. For example, if a client has some difficulty in using words, they can still express themselves in a non-verbal context. Um, as I then look a little more broadly into this, what is it that I'm trying to do? Like, okay, they can make music, and so what does that mean for me? As the music therapist or the assessing music therapist, if we're contextualizing this um, within assessment, is that, and I guess I'm projecting onto this. I view health as a form of being able to engage in a wide range of musical experiences through a range of musical elements. So, for example, if a client is playing in a one-dimensional way, say they're playing say on a drum, very loudly and fast. And then when I alter the music to bring maybe more legato and a diminuendo, they might have some processing difficulties in being able to perceive that music, and the interaction withdraws. So, or kind of the client leaves, or maybe their sensory system gets overloaded. And so for me, the overall goal is to provide them with opportunities to experience music in a multi-dimensional way, through a range of, say, tempo and dynamic and articulation. And so in the assessment tool that I developed. That's kind of what it's trying to understand, I think. Trying to understand how the client perceives, interprets, and creates music with the therapist. And it attempts to take musical interactions apart in a way to understand, okay, what are the client's musical differences? In other words, what do the musical conditions have to be in order for the client to be fully immersed and robust in musicking? And it might be, particular elements of music that I need to focus in on, so that's going to inform my music. And then the other thing is looking at how they respond in a musical social way, the different ways that they do that. And so I've created this developmental way of looking at it in terms of the constructs are developed, from the ground up. So from musical attention, shifting and sharing musical attention, all the way up to being able to initiate um, musical ideas. And I would, from in my experiences, that seems where the clients that I work with have the most challenges, being able to initiate ideas with the intent to relate, um, and then assimilate and differentiate. And so, as the musician therapist, I guess, I think Gary Ansel coined that term. I love that term. Um, I'm trying to provide opportunities so they can hopefully join in and to experience creativity and mutuality in a musically related way. Because, as I mentioned, to bring it back home, uh, because I'm identifying music as health. Um, so that's kind of my perspective and I guess justification for the MCAP assessment profile.
Yeah. Just moving on from that, or do you have a comment back on in the autism spectrum, Thomas? Then maybe I can contribute afterwards.
Yeah, I want to bring in the perspective from the diagnostic view, and I feel that the potentials of music therapy or of music, the therapeutic potentials are also frameworks to observe behavior. And what you told about, John, that there's a musical interaction that's very important. If you start to play, you have joint attention, or you have back and forth playing, or you attunement and dynamics, and this is highly social. And so that's in my assessments, it's an ideal framework to observe autistic traits, so communication, interaction, what is the main core feature of autism. But it's also the you may also observe repetitive behaviors. For example, how people play on the piano. I have some clients, they play the piano like counting the keys, or they play only white and then go to the black keys. So in a very structured way. Also, you may observe sensory issues because instruments are very different. They look different, they feel different, they sound different. So it's musicking is a multi-sensory thing, and you may also observe these things, and you may observe motor coordination, because that's not a key feature in the DSM-5 or ICD-10 motor coordination, but it's very often observed in people with autism and discussed as being a core feature. And if you, for example, in drumming, if you play right left hand, you need the ability to coordinate and to have a kind of a bodily self which is coordinated. Also in dancing to music, it's the same. And so music is a really good framework to observe these things.
Yes, let me continue from that, because my field is a bit different, although it's the same sort of arguments that I built, that you guys built. For me, I completely agree with your point of music, or, you know, I don't, you can't call it effective music, but musicality is something, when it works, it's healthy. So there is an analog or a mirror into the way that we function as humans, can be portrayed in the way that we express ourselves in music, or express ourselves non-verbally or musically, in sort of a more grounded communicative musicality understanding, theoretically, that we are all built with musical building stones from the beginning. So in my field, or the reason why I use music based instead of other types of data collection, like items, or that I include, which are not music based, is because I want to look at the interaction between people, and in this specific situation, between family members, a parent and a child. And I want to look into how do they interact. So what you guys look into between the therapist and the child with special needs, I want to see the same thing, or look at some of the same things, but between a parent and a child. So me as the therapist is out of the picture, so to speak. I create the frame, I facilitate, I role model, I make it happen. But I want to see how they musically interact, to learn or to get insight or collect information about how they communicate or interact in general, because it shows me some of the same things that you talked about, John. Who initiates, who is turn taking something they know how to do. Is it mutual, or is it uneven? How does it happen? And it's very, very geeky into details, who made that first start, and then who followed, or did they follow, who did the lead, to look for these patterns, to look for patterns in the musical way of being together. And the reason why I want to use music as data when I have this task of looking into parental interaction is because I think that the music therapy setting is unique. So when we use music, we have unique data to collect. So if I was a psychologist or a drama therapist or somebody else having a different modality to work within, either words or pictures or whatever, but because I have this setting with music, I want to look at the musical data, because I believe this is where the uniqueness lies. If I did not use the music, I would still have, good, solid information, but then it might be somebody within a different profession that could do some of the same things. So when I make a musical frames, and this is what you talk about, Thomas, when I have a setting of play and fun and resource focused, what can they do, what is functioning, what is able, I see all the resources, I also see the challenges, but I provide a setting where with opportunities of good communication, or functional, effective ways of communicating, to have a prospect, or to have an insight into the potential. I also have a lot of information, as you say, Thomas, in terms of what instruments do they choose, because they have free choice in this setting. And I get so much information out of that. One thing is it a big or a small instrument? And what is it compared to the partner? Or is it the same instrument? Do they choose the same instrument or a different instrument? So even that gives me information as well. Yeah. So interaction for me, I also think in terms of epistemology, John, when you talk about that music is health, I also think that music is communication. Music has to happen between something or somebody, either with your instrument alone or with somebody else. It's communication, interaction with something, and this is what I think we really, as music therapists, can contribute with, as something unique.
Yeah, I think communication is the key. I would equate that as health, because music embodies, the social dimensions. It just is. It just is. And I think I agree with the interaction and the relational capacities as being key. And then trying to understand, okay, what's getting in the way of this? Is it, as Thomas, you mentioned, is it motor planning? Is it are there sequencing challenges, or there could also be emotional challenges, maybe intimacy, or depending on the I guess the client. Um, but I would agree that looking at the robustness or the depth of the interaction in terms of client therapist, or in your case, parent and child, the relational capacities. And it could just be that the parent, for whatever reason, may not be giving the opportunity for the child, or sometimes the child, I've experienced, is leading the parent. you know right? It's the same thing even in a therapist client relationship. And so any of those things I would consider, differences, even cultural differences too, that have to be considered. Um, I'm thinking, I try to think in components of, you have the biological challenges, which could be sensory and motor planning and sequencing, and the emotional challenges, which could be a whole other thing. But then there's cultural differences, and things that, anything that, because my experience coming from, I'm from the U.S., I'm from New York, and then my music is very Western, you know, and so I have my core beliefs of what therapy looks like for me, but that's also embodied in who I am as a person and my background. Then if I go, say, to a Western country, it's a whole different, potentially a whole different way of understanding. Because I think that assessment is really just a meaning maker. We're trying to make meaning of the interaction. And so I don't know if my lens can cross cultures, you know what I mean? So that's why I love things like this and being part of our international group, to chat with you guys. And Thomas, I know we just met through Zoom, but I know your materials. It's it's pretty cool that now we get to meet. You know? And Stina, we go back, but I admire your instrument that you've developed. They're all very much related. All of our work, I think. So yeah.
Thomas, you have anything more, or should we go?
Yeah, I have 2 points. One point is that I do not 100% agree to that music is communication. I think music has a high potential to communicate, but in my assessment, for example, I meet people that do not communicate. They stop playing if I start playing. And there are people, they use instrument to express high energy, or a high inner psychomotor arousal, and they don't want to share it. They do not communicate in music. So there is the potential, but I think it's not absolutely general that music is communication.
No, I completely agree. It is not. My point was that then they communicate that they
Yeah.
communicate
Okay.
that they don't want to
Mm.
communicate, or they have a specific expression, or they communicate. You might go into itsy bitsy to say they communicate with the instrument. They have a
Mm.
communication. Something is
Yeah.
going on between the music and them. That is a communication of something. No, no, no. Communication is not
Mm.
always. No, music is not always happening between people, but between something.
Yeah.
There's
Mm.
always a relation to something. So I agree with you. It's not 100%.
Yeah, I would agree. It's not automatic, but I would say that is communicating that I don't want to play with you. But the other thing is that some kids come in and I think we throw this word musical around so easily, where we want to try to understand the intent behind a client playing, because it could be just a sensory motivation. I like the way the drum. I'm not playing it for an aesthetic or musical reason. I'm playing because this big white thing that we would call a drum feels nice, or I like the proprioceptive input that I get.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on, if that's the motivating factor, then I would not qualify that as music. So I would agree there. But I also would say if I stop playing when you play, I'm communicating by by stopping my music.
Right.
So I think context and everything, we're all in semantics, but that's a great topic that you brought up, Thomas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitions really become crucial. So I guess the next question might be, so when we use music as a core element in assessment, what is the challenge? What makes you think, maybe I should do something else, or this is really complicated, or what are the challenges by basing assessment data on music?
From my point, sorry, I I don't I don't feel there are big challenges in my assessment, because, but I know it from workshops on the music applications that therapists sometimes have problems to diagnose. If they use music, or let's start from this. I think from definitions, I think there are assessments, and I would define assessments as tools to validate a therapeutic process. And there are diagnostic instruments, and they are different. It's a different goal. A diagnostic instruments is the goal is to separate groups, to say he is autistic, she is non-autistic, and that's a different aim. And it's so assessments are differently built. So an assessment for therapy evaluation should be sensible for change, and a diagnostic instrument should be really stable. So if you say he is autistic, then he should be autistic 2 weeks later also. But he may have a process in music therapy, and you may measure changes with a music-based assessment. So these are different approaches. And for if you use a diagnostic instrument or use music in a diagnostic instrument, I think you need a different approach. Therapists, they want to follow the lead of the client. Most of them, they want to get attuned to the client. But if you want to find out something from the client, then you have to move forward, and to to go in a structured way to his borders, to find out how high the abilities are. And I feel that's for a lot of therapists who use music in diagnostic have to learn this point, not to stay attuned with the client in a therapeutic approach, but to see it like it's a kind of a test situation or something like this. And that's for a lot of music therapists, that some don't feel very comfortable in this role or have to learn it.
John?
Yeah, I think in thinking about the challenges of providing music experiences, I think defining what music is, which we're not going to do at this call, but because I know that a lot of folks look at music therapists may look at music as just the way you conventionally make music, right, with a drum and a guitar, piano, singing, and things like that. But depending on the client, and if we're respecting their nervous system or whatever their differences may be, they might have a hard time holding a mallet, or might have a hard time in understanding and processing musical phrasing. To them, some clients that I work with, sometimes I sense that they can't identify the periods and the commas in music. It's just like a ticker tape, and it's hard for them to process it in whatever way. So for clients like that, sometimes I get into musical play, but it wouldn't look music-y, where we're doing hand slapping, but I may be whistling, or I break out puppets and we work in puppet play. Now this would be more, of course, during treatment, because I agree with Thomas in an assessment context. That's what we're doing. We're assessing what type of music or musical capacities do they have, within conventional musical play, and then if we have to switch the media, then we do that. I think also, and I think this is Thomas, what you mentioned on the back end of what you just said, when and I don't know if maybe I'm misunderstanding. When we're assessing, we have to be able to be okay with risk losing the interaction, so we can target other areas. And I think that could be challenging. I think that is a challenge in our discipline, at least in my experiences. Like, what is the difference between assessment and treatment? So if I was working in a treatment context, I still might target, a certain area, which now becomes therapist led, as opposed, first we follow the client's lead, we attune. But if we only do that, then how are we ever going to know what else the client can do or has challenges? And so we have to provide an opportunity to now it's therapist led. So we have to take, we become the agent, because I'm now changing the music. Maybe I'm playing it faster, or I modulate, or whatever that might be. But I have to be okay with risk losing the interaction. And so I think that can be challenging. I think it's more challenging in a music context, maybe I'm projecting, than a verbal therapy context, because linguistically, we're so used to just asking the tough questions sometimes, So the other part of this question, I think, that could make it difficult is how we disseminate the information to non-music therapy professionals, and how do they understand? Because I'm sure you guys experience this, right? You're running a session and there's a window, and somebody looks in and they see the kid's having a great time, he's playing, and for some reason, we identify fun without being therapy. If it's fun, it can't be therapeutic. I don't know. But really, when it's fun and the client's immersed, that's when it's probably at its best. And then to disseminate the information into, what happened to a non-music therapist, sometimes, can be challenging. And I think even for new music therapists, it's just challenging anyway. When the child leaves the room and the parents say, "Oh, so how did he do today?" "Oh, he did great. He played the drum, played the xylophone, even played the horn." And so the parent doesn't know what to ask. But really, who cares about that he played the drum and the xylophone? And what's the context, The manner in which he played. Oh, because last week he seemed to have a hard time changing when I would change the music. And I would imagine transitions might be challenging maybe at home. So we're working on making things more transitionable, or whatever that might be. So the parent, or say the teacher, can understand the language. So I think taking our music assessments, and in my assessment tool, I've tried to use social emotional terms that make sense to educate teachers and parents and other disciplines, so they can read it and say, oh, and then they can look at the interaction and say, oh yeah, I see. He's shifted to the symbol. That's shifting attention or whatever that might be. So I think the communicating the what it is we're doing to the outside world, at least here in the States, I've experienced can be challenging. I think it also hinders our field when we don't know how to say it or write about it. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of my ideas on the challenges of music.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely, Thomas, sort of the way I understood what you talked about was that when we use music in assessment, we need to be strict. We need to know specifically this is what we're doing because I need to know this, and this is what we're doing. It's not treatment. I'm not meant to see to needs. I'm meant to seek out information. And as music therapists, this is unusual. I think this is what you're getting at. It's unusual for us not to be in flow or to be in attunement or to go with the flow and see what happens and improvise and be, because we are trained or much more time is spent on the treatment than on how we assess. So it's unusual for us to use music in that strict assessment way, both in diagnostics, but also when you assess any other outcome measure. So that is the challenge, and I agree with you, John. It's a challenge to disseminate it for others who don't know musical terms. I mean, when I train music therapists in the tool about assessment, we spend a lot of time talking about how to write the reports. How do I explain what this means? How do I use terms that not refer to? And in exercise 2, well, it was like, they don't know about the exercise. They don't know about the maracas or the whatnot. So to disseminate music-based both exercises and data collection into something that is understandable is another challenge. I think I would add to that I think transforming music into numbers, I also find a challenge to say that this beautiful, whatever improvisation or interaction or with all the different facets and, all the colors that we love about music, when you reduce it into numbers, you lose something. It's necessary to have, you all know that, it's necessary with the numbers to look into psychometrics and to figure out comparisons. But when you turn it into numbers, you lose something, and you need to be prepared for that loss, to say that's all right. I will lose something using the numbers, and then I can add, of course, with the qualitative descriptions. But this is difficult, or it's a balance to have as you also talked about, to fragment, to take it all apart and then put it all together, and again in a way that makes sense to us and to the ones we work with. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you were mentioning that, because there are some assessments that, because mine, I think the three of us have assessments that numerical values have value. Sorry to be redundant, but then there are assessments that just use a different paradigm that are descriptive in nature, where it's just it's just different. So I was just thinking like hermeneutic, like hermeneutic type assessments that are not grounded in numerical value. So those things couldn't be tested in your psychometric, ways. And so where the therapist may be working in a treatment, you know what I mean, like more of a treatment context. It just dawned on me when you Stine, when you were just mentioning that. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not to say at all that numbers are necessary. Numbers are, if you want to look into psychometrics, you need them. But if you have a different target or aim, probably you don't. I mean, in diagnostics, it's difficult without numbers, but doable, I guess, in certain areas. So it's not to say that it's just when we need to put it into numbers, it's a challenge. Yeah. So I guess one last question, and then I think we need to find a way to end this lovely conversation. The last question is, what do you personally enjoy most about having music as a core element? So what do you look forward to when you do your assessment based on music? What's fun?
Even if the music assessment is very structured. So I really do a course of activities and prescribed interventions. And I did it, I think, 400 times or more. The clients, every client reacts differently, and so it's still fun. It's really still fun, even if it's the same. It's the same interventions. Sometimes I really have to laugh because there are different reactions. It's really funny, and it's even it's a structured assessment or a diagnostic tool. It's not I do this and client does that. It's not that way, and so it shows to have, if you use a structured assessment, by using this, you see how different every individual is, and that's really yeah, that I enjoy it very much.
I would say for me, my assessment is a little more, it's semi-structured. And so um, I just enjoy being creative uh, with the clients. And to be totally honest, it's the only chance I get to play music these days. And so, yeah, and also I'm just like a social experimenter at heart. I'm just curious to know, not that it's not, I'm not looking at in a prescriptive way, but when I'm, being creative aesthetically and I'm being inspired by the client and hopefully vice versa, what's going to happen? What happens? Um, and I like the challenge of it too. Let's say if a client comes in and is having a hard time adapting to the new environment and they're maybe crying or melting down. Um, Not that I enjoy that when they're doing that, but I like the challenge and seeing how music. I look at myself as just a conduit. It's the music really that's kind of mediating, and um, the challenge of seeing how can I join that? Will he let me join him or her? And if not, okay, I have to rethink what I'm doing and reorganize my music or how I'm providing the experience. So um, I would say I would say those things pique my interests. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. Um, for me, I guess one of the things that keeps me at it, or keeps me interested, or keeps me on my toes is when I have these talks with the parents. Because those are potentially very difficult talks. Definitely, of course, when I have bad news or not so good news. But what I always find really intriguing is is how, even though I have things to say that are difficult, it seems like they feel seen and heard, understood. So this area is or this way of looking at it with the music, even though it's, I might say something about that things are difficult in terms of seeing to their needs, or the turn taking is difficult. But when they see the videos and I have talks with them, they understand and they feel understood. Yes, this is completely what is so hard for us, or oh, I know that this is what my child needs, but how do I give this to him? Please help me out. So they just feel so understood, and that's a relief for them. And I'm always anxious that that they will be, mad at me or tension in any way, but it just never happens. They just feel so, what's it called, thankful, to get information they can use. Um, so that keeps me at my toes. Besides some of the things you said. Yes. So I guess we've come to an end. So I just want to thank you. It's great talking with you.
Thanks for having me. It's great to chat with you folks.
Thanks for inviting us. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Nice meeting.